And then it went on jukebox jury and it was voted a miss.
Engelbert Humperdinck once had the kind of fame most artists would sacrifice everything for. But the life he is living now feels nothing like the dream people remember. Behind the velvet voice, the sold-out crowds, and the romantic image is an extremely heartbreaking story, filled with loss, regrets, and a private heartbreak far more devastating than fans ever realized. And now, as age begins to catch up with him, one question hangs over everything. What really became of the man who once had it all? And is his upcoming tour the end of an era? The rise of Engelbert. Engelbert Humperdinck was once one of the biggest names in music. For a few years in the late 1960s and early 70s, he sold more records than almost anyone on the planet. Women fainted at his concerts. Men wanted to be him. He had the voice, the looks, the charisma, and the kind of career that most performers only dream about. But fame is a cruel companion. It comes quickly.
And it was my first #1 ever, and of course it was started in Belgium, and I owe a great deal to that country.
Stays for a while, and then leaves without saying goodbye. Where Engelbert Humperdinck is now, and how his life has turned out, will shock anyone who remembers him from those glory days. Most people don't realize that he wasn't born Engelbert Humperdinck. His real name is Arnold George Dorsey, and he came into the world on May 2nd, 1936, in India, when that country was still part of the British Empire. His early life was ordinary, but his early career was anything but that. Before he could even get started, he contracted tuberculosis, a serious lung infection that threatened any hopes of a singing career. He had to recover fully before he could even attempt to perform professionally. That kind of setback would have ended most careers before they began. But for Dorsey, it was just the first of many obstacles. He first performed under his birth name, Arnold Dorsey, and later as Jerry Dorsey. Neither name worked. He achieved little success, and his career stalled before it ever really started. He was a talented singer with no breaks, no connections, and no luck, till he met Gordon Mills. Mills was a manager who already had Tom Jones on his roster. He saw something in Dorsey that other people had missed. Mills suggested a stage name that was so bizarre it should have been a joke. Engelbert Humperdinck, the name of a 19th-century German composer who wrote Hansel and Gretel. It was long, unusual, and completely unexpected. But this calculated risk ended up working. The single that changed everything was Release Me. It sat on the shelf for 3 months before getting any traction. No radio station wanted to play it, and no record store wanted to stock it. But then, fate intervened. Humperdinck appeared on the television variety series Sunday Night at the London Palladium. The exposure was massive, and the very next day, orders came in for 80,000 copies. His single-day sales record eventually peaked at 127,000. A song that had been collecting dust for months was suddenly the biggest thing in British music. Release Me spent 6 weeks at #1 in the United Kingdom. In doing so, it blocked the Beatles from the top spot. The song that kept Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever from reaching #1 was a ballad by a singer named after a German composer. The Beatles, Humperdinck later said, were not upset. They already had several #1 hits.
Fortunately for me, my very first song.
And did not seem to mind losing this one. After conquering England, his manager told him they had to go to America. Humperdinck appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, and the exposure was unbelievable. Release Me peaked at #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. A singer who could not get a record deal a few years earlier was now selling out arenas on both sides of the Atlantic. In total, he has sold over 140 million records worldwide. Some sources say 150 million. Either way, the number is staggering. The songwriting team behind much of his success was Barry Mason and Les Reed, two British writers who crafted multiple hits for him, including The Last Waltz and Winter World of Love. Their work helped cement his place in the pop music pantheon, but Humperdinck was never content to simply sing what others wrote for him. In Las Vegas during the 1970s, he walked up to Elvis Presley and asked for permission to record some of Elvis's songs. The king not only said yes, he added that he was also doing a lot of Humperdinck's songs. Release Me eventually appeared on Elvis's On-Stage album, a testament to the mutual respect between two legends. Unfortunately, that respect did not extend to everyone in the music business, but Humperdinck took his disappointments in stride. One of the biggest what-ifs of his career involves a song that got away. Bert Kaempfert invited him to Spain in 1966 and played 3 compositions: Wonderland by Night, Spanish Eyes, and a new one called Strangers in the Night. Humperdinck recorded all 3, ready to release them to the world. Then Kaempfert called with bad news. He said Humperdinck could not have Strangers in the Night because Frank Sinatra wanted it. To date, no one knows where Humperdinck's recorded version of that song is. He rebounded from that loss with a late career revival. In 1976, After the Lovin' became a top 10 gold single that brought him back onto top 40 radio. The song featured Linda November as the key female background vocalist, and its success opened doors again. He planned to release Can't Smile Without You as his next single, but before he could get it out, Barry Manilow beat him to it and turned the song into a massive hit. Humperdinck could have been bitter, but he was not. He acknowledged that Manilow did a great job and moved on. For a few decades, Engelbert Humperdinck had it all: fame, fortune, adoring fans, and a voice that could break hearts. But behind the hits and the sold-out shows, there were struggles that the public never saw. Struggles that would eventually cost him almost everything. The struggles behind the fame. For all the success Engelbert Humperdinck achieved, the road was never as smooth as it looked from the outside. Legal battles, bitter rivalries, and humiliating defeats followed him even at the peak of his powers. The name that made him famous almost cost him his career. The first legal trouble came from an unexpected place: the descendants of the original German composer Engelbert Humperdinck, the man who wrote Hansel and Gretel, sued to stop the pop singer from using the name, and they won. Dorsey was forced to skip the family name for releases and appearances in Germany. He could sell records there, but not under the name that had made him famous everywhere else. The composer's son, Wolfram Humperdinck, said publicly that his father was never a pop star and demanded that the singer leave his name alone. The family wanted him barred from Switzerland as well. The pop singer defended himself by arguing that there never was a real live Engelbert Humperdinck. He claimed it was merely a pseudonym adopted by the German opera composer, hence free for anyone to use. The court disagreed. For years, one of the biggest markets in the world was largely closed to him because of a name dispute. But while this legal battle took a toll, the rivalry with Tom Jones was more personal. Both singers were managed by Gordon Mills, the same man who had given Humperdinck his stage name and his career. Mills had a financial incentive to promote both artists, but that created natural tension. The two men were constantly compared, constantly pitted against each other, and constantly competing for the same audience. The ugliest dispute between the two came over Release Me. Tom Jones claimed he was offered the song first and turned it down. Humperdinck publicly called that claim unreasonable. He said Jones never had that song. Whether Jones passed on it or not, the song became Humperdinck's signature. and the two men have never fully resolved the tension between them. But the Eurovision humiliation in 2012 was perhaps the most public embarrassment of Engelbert's career. At 76 years old, he represented the United Kingdom in Baku, Azerbaijan, with a ballad called "Love Will Set You Free." He sang his heart out, as he later put it. The rest was out of his hands. He finished 25th out of 26 contestants, scoring only 12 points. Only Norway did worse, with 7 points. Sweden won with 372 points. Despite the humiliation, Humperdinck later called Eurovision one of the highlights of his career. It was so bad that bookmaker William Hill gave odds of 25-1 that the United Kingdom would pull out of Eurovision entirely the next year. The name ban in Germany made his career there nearly impossible for years, but he found a way back. In the 1980s, he worked with German super producer Jack White and landed a #1 hit in Germany with the LP Träumen mit Engelbert. It was a complete career revival in a market that had legally forbidden him from using his own name. He followed that with an experiment in 1989, working with Dieter Bohlen of Modern Talking fame. Decades later, a strange thing happened. His song, "A Man Without Love," found new life on TikTok and streaming services after being featured in Marvel's Moon Knight and The Umbrella Academy. A generation that had never heard of Engelbert Humperdinck was suddenly streaming his music by the millions. The man who had been blocked from the German charts by a legal dispute and humiliated at Eurovision was now a viral sensation among teenagers who had no idea who he was. The career had its ups and downs, the name, the rivalries, the public failures, but none of those struggles compared to what happened behind closed doors. The fame brought money, but it also brought expenses. And Engelbert Humperdinck learned the hard way that a fortune can disappear faster than a hit single. The financial struggles and downfall. For a man who sold over 140 million records, Engelbert Humperdinck has had a surprisingly difficult relationship with money. The fame and the fortune never quite aligned the way they should have. And long before the sold-out arenas and the television appearances, he learned a painful lesson about what happens when you do not have enough cash to cover the basics. In the 1960s, before anyone knew his name, Humperdinck allegedly won £33,000 on the football pools. That was a life-changing amount of money, roughly £800,000 in today's currency. But there was a problem. He and his wife could not afford the postage to claim it. A fortune disappeared because of a stamp. The man who would one day sell out the London Palladium could not scrape together the money to mail in a winning ticket, and the loss haunted him for years. The bad luck with money did not end there. In 2001, a company called Engelbert Humperdinck Tours 2001 Limited went into voluntary liquidation with debts exceeding £262,000. Almost 20 suppliers, including sound, lighting, and transport companies, were never paid. The timing raised eyebrows. He resigned as a director just 29 days after the company was incorporated. That is not the kind of detail that looks good in a court filing. A supplier told the press that he was disgusted when he learned Humperdinck was going to represent the United Kingdom at Eurovision. Surely, the supplier said, the country was not so hard up that it needed a man who walked away from small businesses to sing for the nation. Humperdinck wrote to creditors personally, blaming poor ticket sales for the collapse. But the damage to his reputation was already done. When he performed at Eurovision in 2012, placing 25th out of 26 contestants, creditors from the 2001 bankruptcy resurfaced in the press. They used his failure on stage as an opportunity to reignite old claims that he was a man who walked away from small businesses. A man who had spent decades building a reputation as a romantic crooner was suddenly being painted as someone who left working people unpaid. Then came the court ruling in 2003. Humperdinck sued a man named Darrell Payne, the owner of Classic World Productions based in Aurora, Illinois. The dispute was over rights to his 1995 spectacular concert at London's Royal Albert Hall. Humperdinck accused Payne of obtaining rights through forged papers and illegally marketing tapes and recordings. The lawsuit dragged on for 4 years. The judge assigned to the case was United States District Judge Manuel L. Real in Los Angeles. He dismissed the case on summary judgment, which means he did not even think it was worth sending to a jury. His ruling was brutal. He called the lawsuit frivolous and said it was driven by apparent ulterior anti-competitive business motives. The testimony that came out during the case was damaging. Humperdinck himself testified in his deposition that he had no idea who owned the rights to the concert. The man suing over ownership of a concert could not say who actually owned it. The court also found that the lawsuit was largely funded by a competitor, a man named Tom Bonetti, the former president of Janus Records. Humperdinck was essentially used as a front for Bonetti's personal vendetta against Payne. The singer was not the mastermind. He was the pawn. The destruction wreaked on Payne was severe. He said the lawsuit cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, millions in lost business revenue, and sullied his reputation. His bank accounts were frozen. Federal marshals accompanied Bonetti to search through Payne's inventory as it was being seized. All of this happened because a singer who admitted he did not know who owned the rights to his own concert allowed himself to be used as a weapon against a small business owner. The judge awarded Payne more than $700,000 in attorney's fees. Humperdinck's lawyer said the case was being appealed, but the public damage was done. The romantic crooner who sang about love and loss was now associated with a frivolous lawsuit that destroyed a small business. But while the financial struggles were real, none of those losses compared to the greatest tragedy of his life. The woman who stood by him through all of it, the one who had been there since before the fame, before the name change, before the hits and the arenas and the television appearances, was dying. And Engelbert Humperdinck could not do a thing to stop it. The greatest tragedy of his life. For 56 years, Engelbert Humperdinck had one constant in his life. Through the name changes and the legal battles, through the chart-topping hits and the humiliating defeats, through the financial collapses and the court rulings, there was one person who never left his side. Her name was Patricia Healy. She was an actress when they met, and she became his wife on October 12, 1964. She stayed his wife until the day she died. And that day, when it came, broke him in ways that no bankruptcy or bad review ever could. The beginning of the end came quietly. Patricia was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a cruel condition that steals memories, personality, and eventually the ability to recognize the people who love you most. In 2017, Humperdinck revealed that she had been battling it for approximately 10 years. That meant the diagnosis probably came around 2007. For a decade, he watched the woman he loved disappear piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His first public comments about her condition came in 2017. He told the press that it was hard, but this was one of the obstacles in life that had been thrown at his family, and he had to cope with it in the best possible way he could. That was Engelbert Humperdinck in a nutshell. A man who had faced tuberculosis, a name ban, a Eurovision humiliation, and financial ruin, was now facing the slow loss of his wife, and still refusing to complain. The reality of caring for her changed his life completely. He could not leave her for more than 4 days at a time while touring. That meant no long stretches on the road, no extended tours, and no being away from home for weeks at a time, like he had done for decades. Full-time caregivers came to their home in Southern California daily, and he emphasized that they treated Patricia like a part of their own family. But caregivers are not the same as husbands. They could tend to her physical needs, but they could not love her the way he did. The hardest moments came on stage. He admitted that lyrics sometimes hit him harder during performances when he thought of her condition. He said it sometimes tears you up, and you can't help it. He hoped that audiences would understand why he got more emotional than he normally did on stage. Imagine being a singer who has performed love songs for 50 years, and suddenly every word you sing is about the woman who no longer remembers you. His desperation for a cure was real. He said he was searching everywhere. In fact, he added, if he could find the good Lord, he would ask him to come and help. That was the language of a man who would trade every hit record he ever had for one more lucid conversation with his wife. In 2017, he released an album called The Man I Want to Be. It was an ode to his wife of 53 years. He called it a love letter to her while she was still alive, but losing herself. She could not fully appreciate it. She may not have even understood what it was, but he made it anyway, because making music for her was the only way he knew to say what words could no longer express. He also tended to a garden she had created in Leicester, England, just to make her happy, even though she was no longer fully aware of it. He traveled across an ocean to care for plants that his wife had planted years earlier, because somewhere in the fog of her disease, the memory of that garden might still bring her comfort. In January 2021, disaster struck again. Engelbert, his son Jason, 2 caregivers, and Patricia, who was then 85 years old, all contracted a respiratory illness at the same time. Patricia began refusing food, and medical consultations were difficult to obtain. The man who had sung to millions found himself begging on Instagram for fans to pray for a miracle for his beloved wife. He said their hearts were broken and they needed divine intervention. Unfortunately, Patricia Healy died on February 6, 2021, at age 85. His nephew, Father Paul, performed the last rites. Her son Scott was only able to say goodbye via FaceTime, unable to be physically present because of the restrictions in place at the time. A mother died, and her son could not hold her hand. This made the tragedy feel not like a news story, but like a wound. Humperdinck announced her death on Instagram. He wrote that Patricia passed away peacefully, surrounded by her children via video chat. He added that she was now running through the glorious gardens of heaven, reunited with loved ones, no longer held back by her earthly limitations. The family, he said, was broken-hearted. The man who had sold 140 million records, who had shared stages with Elvis Presley and Dean Martin, who had survived tuberculosis and bankruptcy and a name ban and a Eurovision humiliation, was now just a widower living alone in a house that used to be full of life. The love of his life was gone, and the only thing left to do was figure out how to keep going. And now, at the age of 89, this is where Engelbert Humperdinck is. He is an old man learning to live without the woman who stood beside him for decades. But there's something even more heartbreaking going on. Engelbert may have just announced the end of his career, and it's coming sooner than anyone wants to admit. The end of an era. The time comes for every performer to hang up the microphone. For Engelbert Humperdinck, that time is now. At 89 years old, the man who has sold over 140 million records has finally announced that he is saying goodbye. As of April 2026, The legendary singer has announced his final tour from Sydney, Australia. This is not his first attempt at retirement. He originally tried to step away with a tour called The Last Waltz, but he got restless and returned to the stage because old habits die hard. This new tour is called the Celebration Tour, but he admits it will likely be the final time fans can see him live. The word likely is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Engelbert Humperdinck does not know how to stop. The physical reality is catching up with him. While his spirit remains willing, the demands of touring are taking a toll. He is pushing through physical pain to perform, doing at 89 what most singers cannot do at 50. Despite everything, he has said that he does not believe he will ever retire. As long as he has his voice, and it is as strong as ever, why should he? It keeps him young. He lives in Southern California, in the same home where he cared for Patricia during her long battle with Alzheimer's. The house is full of memories. Some of them are beautiful. Some of them are unbearable. He stays there anyway, because leaving would feel like abandoning her. In a recent statement, he said that he wants to continue performing until God calls him. This is not just his career, he said. It is his life. Despite the sadness of his personal life, he has found new fame in the most unexpected place. TikTok, his song A Man Without Love, was introduced to a generation that had never heard of Engelbert Humperdinck. Teenagers who were not born when he last had a hit single are now streaming his songs by the millions. The old crooner is a viral sensation. This is the kind of late career revival that almost never happens, and he is savoring every moment of it. He is also not done creating. On his 90th birthday, May 2nd, 2026, he is releasing a new single titled I Got You. He refuses to stop creating, despite the grief and the health issues and the physical pain. The man who could have retired decades ago and lived comfortably on his royalties is still in the studio, still writing, still recording, and still trying to connect with audiences the way he has done for nearly 60 years. His own words on life recently reveal a man who has made peace with his circumstances but has not surrendered to them. On caring for his wife during her illness, he said that it was what he had to do and that he remained quite positive with the results. He always has a positive attitude in life. He always thinks nothing is going to get worse. It can only get better. This is his deliberate decision to look at the worst thing that has ever happened to him and refuse to let it break him. Speaking on why he went public with her Alzheimer's diagnosis, he said it was to raise awareness. He believes that when people know that somebody is not very well and they pray for you, it travels through the air like a spider web. It has a current that travels through the world and finds its way into the needed spot. When asked about his ambition at 89, he said something that should make every young person rethink their assumptions about aging. He said he has never looked at himself and thought that he had arrived, that he had made it. He has never been satisfied. That is not greed, he said. It is ambition. He is still striving for things. After 60 years in the music business, after all the hits and the awards and the sold-out arenas, Engelbert Humperdinck is still reaching for something more. The final tour will end eventually. The new single will come and go. The TikTok fame will fade, as all viral moments do. But Engelbert Humperdinck will keep singing until he cannot sing anymore. The man who lost a fortune because he could not afford a stamp, who was banned from using his own name in Germany, who watched his wife forget who he was, who begged for prayers on Instagram as she lay dying, is still standing, and still believing that the next song might be the one that changes everything. Do you want to see Engelbert Humperdinck retire? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.